seminar on contemporary China, and also jointly it is a seminar of our graduate school of economics. And today I invited Dr. Floriano Filho, who is staying with us at our institute as a visiting research fellow for 1 year, and already half a year, I think. And well, recently he sent me a wonderful paper which is entitled China, Japan, and the Global Race for Lithium. And it is closely related to the situation in Latin America. So I've just began to study about the relationship between China and the Latin American countries. So I found it very interesting, and also it deals with a quite specific topic, which is lithium, which is an important resource regarding our renewable, our batteries, and so I have great interest, although I have very little knowledge about the subject. I did some study on rare earth, but not on lithium, so I have great hopes to today's presentation. So, Floriano, the floor is yours, please.
Well, Professor Tomo Marukawa, thank you very much for the invitation. Minasama, konnichiwa, hajimemashite, Brajiru karakita, Floriano Tomoshimasu. Yoru kereba eigo de hanashimasu. My first question to you is, should I wear the mask or should I take it off?
Oh, you can take it off.
Take it off?
It's okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
Far away.
Sense of freedom. So as I was saying, once again, I thank Professor Tomo Marukawa very much for all of you, Ito Sensei also for his participation here in the beginning. I know he has to live sometime soon. My thanks also to Ms. Kimiko Tanaka, who helped to put this seminar together. I'm happy to be here today and to exchange ideas with you all. I'm also a learner about this subject. It's a very complex issue. It involves a lot of different things around the world. And I should clarify right at this point that I'm not an engineer, I'm not an expert on chemical products, on lab experiments concerning lithium. My field is political economy, but because I was writing this paper, I had to learn a few things about certain technicalities involving lithium as well. In fact, my research here at the University of Tokyo goes well beyond this specific topic that I will talk about today, which is lithium global value chains. And I put global value chains in the plural because there are different value chains, not just one in the world. And then we're gonna talk about some of them here with you. But before I enter the lithium specifically, I thought it was a good idea to bring you some context so that we would be more or less on the same page. I understand this is not an easy topic, not even for me, who have been studying this for some time now, and many people don't really realize the importance, the depth, and the broadness of this issue. Not the technical part and not the political economy part. So I'm gonna bring you here some context, some basic information so we can all have a clear vision about this issue. Okay, so the picture that I used in the cover page of this presentation was taken from the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail has its own online company, which is the Mail Online, as most of newspapers have. They all entered the internet age. And the reasons, a couple of reasons I decided to use this picture were first, this summarizes many different investments that China and Chinese companies, Chinese banks are doing in different countries in Latin America. So it's an interesting view, a recent one. This was published late last year, October 2021. But also, I thought it was interesting to show you that picture right in the beginning, because as you notice here, the amounts, the values are in sterling pounds. And I thought it was interesting to bring that about, because the first point I wanted to bring to you is the fact that this is really a global issue. We're not talking here about a bilateral relation between a country and a region of the world, China and Latin America. We are talking about an issue which has global implications. So that's point number one I wanted to bring to you today. And I just listed here a few points that reinforce this first argument that I'm bringing to you here today. Those are just examples. You could include others, but I just wanted to bring a few here today just to illustrate this first point I'm making, which is this is a global relationship, not a regional one, okay, or not a bilateral one. And we could point out, first of all, the US-China dispute. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Belt and Road. And then Belt and Road in itself has implications for the energy sector, for the financing sector. And then there are so many things which are complementary between Latin American countries and China. Of course, China is also a big producer of oil, coal, other energy supplies, but still China demands a lot more energy than it produces, even though it produces a lot. And Latin America is one of the places in the world where you have access to cheap sources of energy, and that's why China in the past has been, ready to invest in countries like Venezuela, despite the political complications we all know about in Venezuela, or buying also lots of oil from Brazil, which became an oil exporter more recently. Soft power, I could, talk about, for example, the existence of Confucius Institutes throughout Latin America, and I'll show you a picture later on about that. We could mention also the rare earth minerals, and as we know, China is the absolute producer of rare earth minerals in the world. In the past, there were problems between China and Japan regarding that specific product or products, because there are different kinds of rare earth. So just today I was watching this interesting German documentary about this issue, and talking about how countries are looking for different ways to have access and increase their own production of rare earth, especially in the face of this new situation we're having in the world with this war in Ukraine, which is changing the geopolitical system. And of course, recently we had some tough talks between Europe and China, the government of China, about different issues, but basically the Europeans wanted to know what was the Chinese stance on the Ukraine war. And I also mentioned here biodiversity. Of course, biodiversity is another. Oh, let me just go back for a minute to say that in the past, Brazil, where I come from, was one of the largest rare earth producers in the world. So this new situation might bring about new opportunities also for different countries to step into this area of rare earth. Now going to biodiversity, as we know, we're talking about different biomes, and we are talking about also water availability and food production. And again, this war in Ukraine, it clearly showed how food security is a very important problem for everybody in the world, and Latin America, of course, is one of the places in the world where you have an overproduction of food being exported and helping to secure supplies of food internationally. And I also mentioned here 5G, which is another important aspect of this relationship between China and Latin America. So this is a link for a YouTube video about a plant that was opened in Brazil some time ago by Chinese Huawei, which is the telecoms company everyone knows about because it was in the center, one of the companies in the center of this dispute between the US and China. We know that this started with Trump in the presidency. His government imposed a series of sanctions and tariffs on different companies in China, and Huawei was like the child post of that friction, that tension between the US and China. So Huawei has been looking for alternatives in that difficult situation confronting the US. And then I wanted to just play a small segment of the video, maybe 30 seconds, for you to get an idea of how 5G is being used to get new possibilities in this relationship between China and Latin America. This is a warehouse open in the outskirts of São Paulo, Brazil, and they are using 5G to Okay, so that was just a small segment of the video I wanted to show you, just to give you one idea of the possibilities which are appearing, and new possibilities of uniting technologies and different interests. And that, of course, also relates to e-commerce. different Chinese companies have been in the last years growing exponentially in Latin America in different sectors. Certainly, electronics is one of those sectors. And by the way, just a quick reminder that Tanaka-san, she uploaded this presentation to the website here, so you're going to be able to have access to all these links and references later on if you want. So if you miss anything that I'm talking about now, don't worry, because you're going to be able to access those references and links later on if you want. So the first point I just brought to you was about this global impact of this relationship. The second point, which I think is important for us to be more or less on the same page now, is the fact that when we talk about China and Latin America, we might be tempted to see Latin America as a whole homogeneous block, but that's not the case really. You're talking here about a region of the world which has many disparities, many different ways of thinking, many different mindsets, many different cultures. Well, as for language, Brazil is the only country where Portuguese is spoken there. In most of the others, they speak Spanish, but that doesn't mean that they think and act all the same. We have political implications here. Probably I'm not going to have the time to enter very much in the political side of this because it's very complicated and complex. We would need a lot more time to expand on the political side. But of course that is very important too because as we know, the China is governed by a communist party, and of course a communist party has certain ideological principles, and it's easier to negotiate with other political parties which think more or less on the same lines with your own ideologies. Regardless, the Chinese approach has been very much pragmatic, we could say. Pragmatic, that meaning that even the dialogue with different political parties on different sides of the ideological spectrum, despite of that, business goes on. Business, that they are open for business, and most governments in the region are open for business as well. And then that old idea that Latin America follows the US perhaps deserves some review, because I don't think that's the case anymore. You take again the case of 5G. Of course, there was pressure, a lot of pressure on different countries to avoid Huawei, for example. And initially, Brazil was tending to go in that direction, but then they realized, after the tender process that the country had recently, last year, they said, we cannot do without Huawei because there are so few companies in the world capable of providing the services and appliances for networks, for 5G networks that we need, that we don't have options. I mean, who else? Finland, Norway, that's a lot more expensive. So pragmatism is not only on the side of China, it's on the side also of many of those countries which are thinking not only about the future, but also remembering what happened in the past. So it's not only China that knows what happened in the past. A lot of people there in Latin America also remembers what happened in the past. Of course, we don't have time here today to discuss these historical facts, but those historical facts are also important for the current political discussion because, a lot of people who are in power now today, they were part of that history and they remember what happened before. So I'm just giving you one idea of how this negotiation process, how this dynamic works. So as I was saying, it's not a homogeneous, it's a heterogeneous region. But if you still want to look at the region more or less as a whole, just for the sake of our pedagogical understanding here, there are some facts that you more or less could generalize in terms of this relationship. One of them is the fact that China is already the largest trade partner for many Latin American countries. When you take all the Latin American countries, China is going to be the second largest. The first is who? The United States. But why? Why do you think if China is the largest trade partner of most of the countries, how come the US is still the first largest? The answer is NAFTA, Mexico. So, of course, the trade with Mexico is so big that put the whole trade of the US with the region in a higher position than that of China. But for the time being, we don't know until when, because this dynamic has been evolving so quick that if you ask me, how is it going to be in 5 years from now? I'm pretty sure it's going to be different. Or in 10 years from now, even more so. So today, the total trade between China and the countries in the region is about $315 billion in 2020, or was. Traditional products exported from countries in the region include, I mentioned there, oil and iron ore. China has investing a lot in dams, railroads, electrical grids. In terms of electrical grids, especially in Brazil, both on the production side and on the transmission side, which of course are part of the same system, but different kinds of businesses. And China has been investing on both sides in amazing ways, I should say. We don't have the time today here to talk more deeply about this specific sector, but the investments, I have the data, not in this presentation, but in a different presentation, I have the data about this. It's amazing what has been invested in, especially in Brazil, especially by a Chinese company, which I understand is the largest in this sector in China, State Grid, if I'm not wrong. Consumer products, Chinese consumer products are all over the place, from cell phones to cars to computers, whatever you can imagine. They're all over the place. And then on the soft power side, I mentioned already Confucius Institutes. I'm going to show you a picture about that in a minute, but it's not, the magnitude of this is not counted in hundreds, it's counted in thousands of people going to China and from China to Brazil, or Latin America and Brazil as well. I keep mentioning Brazil because I'm from Brazil, and not only because I'm from Brazil, but because, of course, considering the size of Brazil, when you take the whole of Latin America, not only the trade, but the investments and loans and everything else, with Brazil is much larger than other countries, except in the case of Venezuela because of the oil. But then this the situation has changed recently because of the situation in Venezuela. But anyway, there you see a general picture of this relationship, and also reinforcing the fact that I just mentioned about the heterogeneity of this region, which is Latin America. In 2015, Xi Jinping, who has been to the region many times already, we should remember, and here's another fact that sometimes people might forget, China and Brazil are part of the BRICS countries. So BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So Xi Jinping has been in the region not only for meeting different leaders there, but also for BRICS meetings. And in 2015, and by the way, this is from Deutsche Welle, this picture from another news organization from Germany. He, in 2015, said that he wanted to see the trade between China and Latin America reach 250 billion by 2025, which is in 3 years from now. Let me just open a quick parenthesis here since I saw the Deutsche Welle mark here, I just wanted to mention something else about this cooperation that I forgot to mention before. And when I showed you that video, that YouTube video about this warehouse in the outskirts of São Paulo set up by Huawei, I'm not sure if you noticed that, but that was a story produced by CGTN. CGTN is I think it stands for Chinese Global Television Network, and it's part of the effort from the Chinese government to expand its visibility in the world, and they've been doing a great job in that regard. I mean, CGTN is present already in different parts of the world. And the reporter for that story, for that feature, was Brazilian. I know that because I know who the guy is by his name and even by his accent. So that's curious. They would do that, and very smart in my view, very intelligent, because you are really using local people and walking together with local people to get your foot inside the ground and really have the taste of how things are done locally. So it's a much more, I would say, a much more equal and let's say collaborative relationship than we normally see between bosses and employers, right? Employees. Just tell them, go there and do that for me. Instead of doing that, they say, well, let's work together, and I want to collaborate. And that's, I think, a very important word in the Chinese vocabulary when they are negotiating. We want to collaborate. We want to work together. And that's an important part of this relationship. Well, I am guessing it's probably not going to be so easy to achieve that aim, that goal proposed by Xi Jinping in 2015, mainly because of what happened in the pandemic. But if you consider what was the relationship in 2000 and the year 2000 and what it is now, like it increased about 25 times. the trade relationship between China and Latin America 25 times, from $12 billion in the year 2000 to more than 315 in 2020. And then we had the pandemic, it went down a little, but surprisingly for many people, it didn't go down as much as some were expecting. So this trade, kept pretty well. And you see that the imports from China grew in 2020, helping the trade to continue and not suffer so much from the pandemic. Now, let's bring Japan into this discussion. And I took this graph from a paper wrote by Professor Mikio Kuwayama, who I had the pleasure of meeting some time ago, and we had a very productive conversation with him and also other people from JLAC. JLAC is the Japanese Latin American Association here in Japan, and they have been dedicating themselves to this relationship for decades, in fact, and they represent different companies from Japan which have businesses in Latin America. And Professor Kuwayama, he wrote this article which is available online. If you type in these words here on Google, you're going to find his article, Globalized Business of Japanese Multinationals in Latin America, and then it goes on. It doesn't end there, but it's a long title. But it shows clearly what was the situation before in terms of both exports and imports. And there you have China, Japan, Korea, Asian, and India. And this is really striking, don't you think? Because in 1981, Japan was the China of today, right? And then in the early 2000s, exactly 2001, so China enters WTO at the end of 2001, right? I think December of 2001. And at that point, you see the situation a situation that starts to reverse. And then the next year, 2002, they're already at the same level. And then from there on, the trade between those partners, they were reversed. And now, both in terms of exports and imports, you see, at least for me, this was really a striking graph to see, because it summarizes so well not only this relationship between Japan and China with Latin America, but also the situation of other countries, in this case Korea, ASEAN, which is another association here in Southeast Asia, and India. But of course, you are talking here about the second and third largest economies in the world, and that's really what was striking to me, to see that change, the complete change in this relationship. And here's another graph also from this same paper of Professor Kuwayama, which shows clearly in absolute terms, but an average of 3 years between 2016 2019, the total amount of trade, and then you have in green exports and blue imports, and then you have a comparison. I'm not gonna discuss the paper of Professor Kurayama here, but then he goes on, just so that you know, he goes on to discuss on how, in qualitative terms, these two relationships are different. China and Japan with Latin America. If you are interested, as I said before, you can go online and it's available there. So he's basically defending the idea that you should not look at the relationship, the total amount in absolute terms of Japan and China, but also should look in qualitative terms. Okay, and then I'm looking at the watch here because I have about 1 hour to talk, and so I think I'm gonna run a little bit more now, so I'm not gonna enter the lithium. I came here to talk a little about lithium, and there's so much. So I brought this other graph from Atlantic Council to emphasize another point that I wanted to bring to you here. This starts in year 2000, and again we go back to the WTO cut 2001, and then you can see clearly who was the big loser in this trade relationship, right? I don't need to tell you, I think, who was the big loser and who was the big winner. And now I'm not, as you can see, I'm not comparing anymore China and Japan. I'm now comparing different parts of the world. And not surprisingly, you have, and I'm putting here just a few institutions in the US and elsewhere which started to analyze and research about this very issue I'm discussing now in very summarized terms. I'm just bringing like the surface of this iceberg to you here today. So a lot of different institutions in the world, especially in the United States, they started to research about this matter, this relationship, China, Latin America, because they saw the importance of this. And of course, I'm not gonna discuss all the papers they produced already and all the discussions they had about this issue, because it's too much. I just wanted to call your attention to two, in case you are interested in the subject, to 2 or 3 institutions that might be very interesting for our purpose here to know better about this topic. One first institution is the USCC, United States China Economic and Security Review Commission, not to be mixed with the Congressional Commission, which is made of politicians in the US from both parties. I'm talking on this commission here on the left hand side of our screen, the USCC, and they by law they produce every year a report, an annual report. The latest report came out in 2021, and look at chapter 1 of their report. Their chapter 1 about US-China relations, section 2 is titled China's Influence in Latin America and the Caribbean. There you can see, I don't think I need to reinforce how important this relationship is for them, right? I think it's clear there. But when you look at the paper, the latest paper they produced, the latest report, not paper, but a report they produced, they come out with several key findings. I just summarized 3 of them here. Economic interests are a main driver, but increasing pursuit of political and security objectives, including Taiwan and military, in this relationship between China and Latin America. Influence in political and social structures through national and subnational governments and NGOs, and democratic backsliding. So you can go online. This report is available online if you are interested, and you can download the full report and take a look. And here's a map that is also shown in that report. I'm going to get closer to it so you can see how they mark different countries in the region. And in the case of this map, they show here the visits by Xi Jinping, the party-to-party meetings, the Confucius Institutes, and those countries which diplomatically recognize Taiwan. So this is the more political map. It's the more political map, right? And also dealing with soft power and diplomacy. And this is the other map they show in their latest report. And this is more the economic map. And they show mining, fossil fuels, agriculture, electricity, surface transportation, ports, and also Taiwan. So as you can see, and as I said in the beginning, this is a very, very broad and very, very deep relationship. We would have to be here not for 1 hour, but for maybe an entire year to cover all the different areas and all the different aspects of this. It's too long. So the other institutions I would emphasize are the InterAmerican Dialogue, Boston University. They've been working together on this relationship between China and Latin America. They have very interesting databases. One of database they constructed, and I should remember that at ISS, where we are based, one of the precious elements that they have are the databases, right? So in this case also, of course, database is very important for science, and then they have this database for finance, for commercial loans, and this is all available online as well. So to sum up this first part to make us be in the more or less on the same page, we could talk involving this relationship. We could talk about bank lending to the region. We could talk about Belt and Road. We could talk about Chinese manufacturers in the region, including in the automobile sector, which we know is very important for Japan, and that's why I'm bringing this picture here. Car manufacture is growing by Chinese in Latin America is growing quickly, but not only car, buses, electric buses also from China and Latin America growing quickly. We could talk about trade agreements. We could talk about IT, Chinese IT companies in Latin America. This is Lenovo Brazil. We could talk about energy companies acting in Latin America. We could talk about consumer products. This is another plant, a Chinese plant in Brazil. We could talk about many different things, but today we're going to talk about lithium. Right? That's our topic today. I finally got to our topic here today. I'm sorry about the long time to explain this context part, but I thought it was important because I think most of us don't realize the size of this, the dimension of this. So lithium, and then here's another context. I would put lithium, the lithium situation is in this context of smart cities, particularly in the cross-section between mobility and energy and environment. So different companies here in Japan as well are seeing this new revolution taking place, which they're calling immobility. The other day, I sent this link for this presentation to someone in a different country, and the person asked me, "Oh yeah, Floriano, I hope you have a good presentation. Lithium is used for batteries, right?" And then I realized, wow, I think I have to explain what lithium is. because people like this friend, and she's a professor in a university, she was not very sure. And then this graph, I think, summarizes the applications of lithium. And as you can see, in fact, batteries were not the great, objective of lithium extraction before. It was, as we can see here, ceramics and glass. And then, as you can see in the mid 2000s, the application for lithium in the battery world started to grow. One of the main responsible people for that is Elon Musk, right, from Tesla. And here, Toyota also in Japan and other companies also, they were responsible for this revolution, really. I was just hearing an interview today at Bloomberg, and this guy who covers EVs, electric vehicles in the U.S., he was reminding us, until 2014, nobody really took EVs, batteries, lithium batteries very seriously for EVs. And then, this explosion happened, and then nowadays everybody, and I show you a picture later, an image later, that clearly shows how this revolution is taking place in the world, and a revolution where China is absolutely ahead in this race, absolutely ahead. And that's, I think, there's no way we can deny that. There are still people who believe in hydrogen as an alternative. So far, lithium seems to be winning this race. But I think this is still in its initial stage, so there's more to come. I think it's too early to call, but so far lithium is winning, seems to be winning. And there you have the different configurations of EV cars, hybrid electric, plug-in, battery electric, and fuel cell. And there in this graph, as I said before, you have access online to this presentation. You can, if you want, you're gonna have time to go through this, and like I was trying to understand myself, these divisions, there are so many options that it gets confusing many times. But I think the three key words in this area, in terms of looking at who is going to win, are range, durability, and cost. I think those are three, maybe among others, but I see those three key words as absolutely important to determine who is going to win this battle. And there is really a battle going on. Here's the case of Toyota as one of the pioneers